Fowler suggested that the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, should marry someone after the death of his wife, and this is almost 2 years after the death of his first wife, because of his daughters. They needed someone. And she said, if you want a matron, then Sauda. If you want a young girl, then the daughter of your best friend. Okay? Now, he gave her permission to go and talk to both of them. And Sauda, since she was a widow, she could speak for herself, and her father agreed, so she said yes. In the case of Abu Bakr Siddiq, he wasn't at home when she came. Sorry, he was home, but she said, wait here, and I'll be back. And he left, and he went to the house of the father of the boy to whom Aisha was betrothed. And he said to the father, if my daughter becomes Muslim, will your son still marry her? And the father said no. And he took that as an excuse to break the betrothal. He said she's become Muslim, and they broke the betrothal. Now he came back to Sauda, and now he said yes. So the first thing is to establish the integrity, credibility of the father of the girl. Okay? On top of that, it shows that since she was already engaged, betrothed, it was the custom of the time. It was not something peculiar to Muslims, because when the girl became Muslim, the father said that they wouldn't get married. Okay? So it was the custom of the time, not something peculiar to Muslims. Now, girls in hot climates reach puberty earlier than those in cold climates. This is a fact. If you talk to doctors from Scandinavia, they will tell you in some cases up to the age of 19 before girls reach puberty. If you talk to people in hot countries, it can be a lot earlier. And to all intents and purposes, it's earlier than 9. Okay? The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, was not pushing for the marriage. He was being asked to get remarried. And when they went to Medina, it was the father of the girl who said to him, when are you going to take her bride home? He wasn't saying he wanted to take her home. It was the girl's father who said, when are you going to take the bride home? So what this shows is that it's the circumstances and it's the prevailing custom. It is not the Prophet. Peace and blessings be upon him. Okay. Now, it just so happens that if you look at the Middle Ages website, and you look at noble women in the Middle Ages, age of consent in the Middle Ages in this country, the romance of courtly love was completely opposite to the practicalities of medieval marriage. The age of consent, with parental permission, it was legal for boys to marry at 14 and girls at 12. A betrothal often took place when the prospective bride and groom were as young as 7 years old. And in the case of higher nobility, many were betrothed as babies. But the marriage was only legal once the marriage had been consummated. So even in this country, in the Middle Ages, this black period that no one talks about, they were getting married at 12. Officially. Unofficially, it'd be earlier. And they were being betrothed at 7. What's the difference? What's the difference? And why is it not talked about? I'm not apologetic on these topics, and I don't think we need to be. I said right from the beginning, you cannot read the past into the present, and you cannot read the present into the past. If women only had a life expectancy of 20 to 40 years, how many children were they going to have in that time? What age were they going to get married if they were going to die by the age of 20? I have to know a lot more than what we think about. And we don't even care. And we don't even try to explain it. And as a result, we get all these silly questions being thrown at us. Then we've got interfaith marriage. Why is it that the husband can marry a Christian or a Jew and the wife cannot? Okay? Well, let's think about it. Which prophets do the Jews not accept? Jesus and Muhammad. Peace and blessing be upon them. Which prophet do the Christians not accept? Muhammad. Peace and blessing be upon him. Who is the head of the household in general? Male? In Islam, yes. Who is providing for the woman? The husband. So the responsibilities for bringing up the children, although it will be closer to the woman, are actually being taken care of by the man. So who would expect to have the final say on the education of the child? The man. Now, a Christian or a Jewish woman married to a Muslim man, in practicing their religion, their profits are accepted by the Muslim. No problem. But in the case of the Christian and the Jewish man, their profit, the wife's profit, is not accepted by the Jew or the Christian. Simple as that. Right? And we have cultural distortions. Honor killings, rights of the Quran. Women are not allowed to work, drive, participate in public life, or be educated. These are all cultural distortions, and you should be able to know the difference between them. Okay? Now, alcohol. Is wine consumption good or bad? In the Quran it talks about wine in paradise. What people don't realise, of course, is it's non-alcoholic wine in paradise. It's not intoxicating. Khamr is something which takes you out of your senses. Something where you don't know what you're doing because you're under its influence. That is not the type of wine that we talk about in paradise, in general. Okay? And everyone will tell you, I can handle my drink. Everyone will tell you, I can handle my drink. Well, I can assure you they cannot. And I can give you examples. But first, I have a twin brother. He's a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Why? Because if he takes the first drink, he will not stop drinking until he is unconscious. And he will happily come and give you talks on that. He goes to Alcoholics Anonymous and talks on it. He's chairman of one of the branches. All right? All right? So you can take my word for that. This one I put there because I think it's quite funny. The soldier died of a violent fever contracted by drinking small beer when hot. Right? Here, he died just from drinking beer. But he could handle his beer, couldn't he? He could handle his drink. Okay? I found a postcard for that, so I took it. I tried to make it a bit bigger so you could read it, but I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just trying to make you a little bit light-hearted about drinking and make sure you remember it, okay? So the issue is not just the talk, the issue is that you remember. Okay? Apostasy. Going back on your religion. Now, in the Quran, it does in fact say that it is a death penalty. But it's never been applied in terms of, by the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, in terms of the first two caliphs, the first two successors, as the rulers of the Muslim state. Okay? At the time of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, we know of two instances. One, where one of his scribes said he was going to revert from Islam, and he went to Mecca. Nothing happened to him. Another man said, I'm going to go away from Medina, I'm going to go away from Islam. He was allowed to go, and we hear no more about him. That's at the time of the Prophet. So what is the conclusion? And the conclusion is that in an Islamic state, if someone starts to call to another religion, it's like sedition. It's like sedition. And you know what happens when you have traitors to the state. They all have very severe penalty. It used to be automatic death penalty. And to give an example of that, I don't know if you know the case of Lord Haw. He was the person who used to broadcast in English, as an Englishman, to the English about how good the Germans were on the radio, propaganda. And at the end of the war, he was executed for treason. So you can see it is not trivial. And in the case of people becoming Muslim, going away from Islam, and trying to get other people to go away from Islam, then there can be problems. And if you go back to the time of Abu Bakr, Siddiq, and I'll be pleased with him, the wars of apostasy, the Ridda Wars, where people who claimed to be prophets but were false prophets refused to pay zakat, the obligatory tax on excess wealth. Okay? And Abu Bakr Siddiq said he would go to war with them because there is no separation between salat and zakat, between prayer and this obligatory tax. Okay? And that's when it happened in their time. But that wasn't just people going away from Islam. This was they were refusing to pay a particular tax. Okay? It's referred to as the wars of apostasy, but that is slightly a misnomer. Okay? So I'm not going to go through that. Now, in the case of this person that was in Afghanistan, that you probably remember, that was in the papers a few years ago, he'd been a Christian for some years, and no one knew anything about it. And then when it became public, the mullahs wanted to kill him. Okay? Now, what never comes out is what are the facts. Presumably he was working for a Christian charity. Presumably. I may be wrong. I accept that. But if he was working for a Christian charity, or if he came in contact with Christian missionaries in some form or other, then was he active or was he quiet? And he was there for so many years, 11 years, 17 years, whatever it may have been. Was he actually trying to bring people to Christianity or was he doing nothing? It never came out. So we don't know whether he was active or not. Now, if he was inactive, no problem. But if he was active, problem. Right? That's simple. And here I say, what we know for certain is that neither the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, nor his two immediate successors inflicted the death punishment on any apostate, although there were cases under each one. Now, this is another misnomer. The first one is actually where people were turning out from Mecca, they went to Medina, their property was confiscated, families were broken, and so on and so forth. And here, what they're told is that you can fight them to get your property back. But if the opposition stops, then you stop. Okay? So you were turned out, you can try to reclaim your property. Okay? So that's one. I'm sure you've all heard of The Clash of Civilizations by Samuel P. Huntington. Okay? I think it's discredited, but never mind. But how many of you have heard of or read A Century of War, Anglo-American Oil Politics and the New World Order, published in Germany, first in German, before The Clash of Civilizations, and subsequently in English, after The Clash of Civilizations. And a few years later, republished, updated for Afghanistan and Iraq. I bet you've never heard of it. I have both books, of course.